I'd like to share a testimony that really started when I was about 14 or 15 years old. When I was a teenager, I kind of went to a really small church, and I saw something happen in the church where two people got really mad at each other that had been best friends like their whole lives, and they were in like their 40s and 50s, and they couldn't get over it. They couldn't forgive each other, and there was this big rift between them. And this really touched me because I knew both people. I loved both people, and I was kind of in the middle, and I didn't know where to kind of put my side, and it really pained me. And I thought, these people are having a midlife crisis right now. They can't forgive. They can't move on. And I was like, God, I don't want that to happen to me when I'm 40 or 50, to be like, I can't forgive you. You've been my best friend, but I can't forgive you. And so I was praying, and I was like, God, even if I don't want to learn these lessons later on in my life when, it's going to be a huge deal. It's going to be it's going to change my life. I want to learn them when I'm young. And I know it's going to be painful, but I'd rather have these experiences earlier so that later on my life doesn't fall apart. And so I would pray this prayer periodically in my life. And God answered this prayer, and I went through some painful experiences, but God taught me a lot of things that changed my character. And I was listening to a preacher later on, and he said that basically God will send tests in your lives, and one of those tests is forgiveness. Like, if you'll be able to forgive someone. If you can't, he'll give you another person you'll have to forgive. If you can't do that, there's going to be another person. And another test is rejection. If people reject you, how you respond to that. And there was other tests as well, but I was really praying, God, prepare me for that time. And so when I was about 17 years old, we switched churches, and I really started seeking God. I started praying, God, send me some godly friends that could support me. I started going to Bible college. It was just a really good time to, see God, get in the Word, and I was really blessed. If you pray for God to send you good friends, He will. And looking back, the friends that I'm still friends with after I got married are those that I had God in common with, those that I didn't talk about guys with, that I didn't talk about, college, I'm so stressed out. It wasn't that. It was that, God did this in my life. This is what's going on in my life right now. Can you support me spiritually? It was that kind of a relationship that I still talk to those friends. And one time in Slavic Bible College camp, there was this preacher who was talking about strongholds. And he read this verse that's written in Jeremiah 23:29. And it says, "Is not my word like fire, says the Lord, and like a hammer that breaks the rock into pieces?" And basically he said that strongholds are things in our lives that basically we believe a lie. And if we hear a lie often enough, we'll believe it. And he said that oftentimes we don't even recognize that we believe this lie. We just think, this is the truth because you've heard it since you were little. And in this verse it says that the God's word is like a hammer that breaks the rock into pieces. And he said the rock is that stronghold that's been building and building and building in your life. And so God's word is what breaks it. And so that really touched me. And he said, I challenge you, if you can't think of something in your life that's a stronghold, I challenge you to pray, God, show me where that stronghold is in my life. And God will reveal it to you. So I started praying, and I started praying and praying that God would show me where that stronghold is in my life. And I noticed that whenever you ask God, if you ever ask God, like, God, I'm curious, like, help me to trust you more, or show me what this means in the Bible, I don't understand. If you ever pray, to say, God, I want to seek you, God always answers. And so if you pray, God, show me where that stronghold is, where there's that lie that I'm believing that I don't even know is a lie, God answers. And that's what he did in my life. And I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of background on my stronghold because it'll make the rest of my testimony make sense. I grew up in a family with 3 boys and 3 girls, and I was the youngest girl. And my sisters were amazing, and one of them was amazing with music. She was super talented from 12 years old. She was an amazing piano player. My other sister was really smart and really creative, and so I knew I couldn't be like my sister who was musical because I wasn't super talented in that area. But the other sister was really smart, and that I was kind of like, oh, I can do that, And so I kind of kind of grew up, and everybody kind of started comparing us, like, oh, your sister did this. Are you going to do this? Your sister did this. Are you going to do this? And so I was kind of always had to live up to the standard. And it was kind of hard because that sister was actually really, really, really talented in everything. And when I was growing up, I always felt like she did everything 10 times better and 10 times faster, and she was so much more amazing than me. And next to her, I always felt like I was inadequate. I was not enough. I didn't deserve anything. I was like, man, she is like so awesome, and I'm kind of like, in the shadows. I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm trying really hard. I'm trying to catch up to her, and she's always ahead of me. She's always already somewhere ahead. And so that didn't just happen like in our, family everyday lives. It was in school too. Like when we got to school, the teachers would be like, oh, this was your sister. Oh, you're going to do great too. All the students in my grade and in her grade, they knew us. They knew we were Kirchhoffs. And so they were like, oh, that's a Kirchhoff. Oh, you're going to be just like your sister, huh? You're going to get a 4.0. You're going to go to college. You're going to do this. And so there was all this stuff that she did really well at. And so then I felt a lot of pressure to be just like her. And so, but for me, that kind of, I started basing my worth on, can I meet what my sister did? It wasn't, if I did what my sister did, I felt okay. I didn't feel good. I felt like, okay, I can breathe. Okay, what's the next thing she did? Okay, I have to meet that. Okay, I can breathe. I felt like that was my standard, was my sister. And she graduated with a 4.0 from high school and from Running Start. And so I had to do that. And so she went to a program. She was accepted right out of school. I had to do that. It was very I had to catch up to her every step of the way. And it was hard. I had to put in a lot of work, but I was able to do it. And I knew that it wasn't me. I was praying a lot. I was praying, God, help me, because I can't do this. I know I'm not smarter than her. I'm not at her level, but God, please help me, because I can't do it on my own. And one thing that this really did was it formed my values, in that what made me like a good person or made me valuable is that I could earn good grades, that I could get into a program, those educational things, which are not bad, but for me, I put them so high, like, if I get this, then maybe I'll be good enough. If I get this, and so that kind of became a stronghold in my life, those grades and those GPA and getting in programs. And what happened was that I did really well, and I got into a program. I graduated. I finished my program. I got my license for the state, and then I took some time off because my dad had died when I was in the program, so it was really stressful for me, and there was just a lot of stuff going on that was really hard for me during the program, that I felt like my life was falling apart and I couldn't bring it together. And so I took some time off. I took a couple of months off to not look for a job right away, and that was kind of, on one hand, I think looking back, it was good, but at the time I was like, oh, that was such a big mistake, because all the new grads were applying for jobs right out of school. And so then a couple months passed, I started applying for jobs, and I'm applying against people who have 6 years of experience, 12 years of experience, and here I am, no experience. And so it was really hard to get my foot in the door anywhere. And so I was like, okay, it's fine. I prayed about this. When I was in the program still, I was praying, God, give me a job where I can excel, and where my weaknesses, my strengths. And I was praying even in the program. This was 2 years before. And still, 3 months passed, 6 months passed, 9 months passed, and it was super embarrassing. People would ask me at church, hey, what are you doing? Do you have a job? I'm like, no. Are you, how hard is it to find a job? People would ask me, twice a week. The same person would ask me, twice a week, hey, do you have a job yet? What's going on? What are you doing? Are you sitting at home? What are you, just reading books? Or what are you watching movies? What are you doing at home, It was so embarrassing to, I didn't have a job. I didn't know what to do. It was just so embarrassing, because my value had come from, those grades, that education, and then all of a sudden, I couldn't find a job. And so my value as a person, I felt like such a loser. I felt like I couldn't, everybody's lives were going on, and I was just stuck. And since this was such a huge switch for me, it was really hard, because during this time, I had really prayed for God to help me during all that schooling, and God had really, every time I prayed for a test or for a class or something, God always answered me. But what happened was, when I started praying for a job, it seemed like God just started ignoring me, and it was kind of really hard for me, because I thought, whenever I would pray, God would answer me right away. It would be amazing. I would be so happy. I'd be so amazed. like this was like, I had some really good like miracle stories about how things went down in school, but when I started praying for a job, all of a sudden it was like God was just like God can do stuff. God is able to give you a job. There's tons of jobs. There were tons of jobs. I just couldn't get them. And I was like, God, it's not hard for you to give me a job. Please just give me one job, please. And he was just ignoring me. And that was really hard because I saw my friends and everybody in the youth was moving on, and I was just kind of stuck. And I was like, I kind of wondered, like, God, are you mad at me? Am I, what's going on? Like, why am I not moving on with my life? And sometimes when God is silent like that, like, I still saw him in my life. He still, showed up in where I could see that God was alive and working, but he was ignoring that. Like, I thought he was ignoring and being silent on that problem, that big problem of the job. And I realize now, looking back, that when God is silent and we think, God, why are you quiet? Why, you should be doing something. And it's almost actually the opposite, I think. I think when God is quiet, God is saying, I need you to do something, or I need you to stop doing something. And that's kind of how it was in my life. And so what happened was I was invited to participate in junior camp, and I had applied for jobs, and I was kind of at that place where I was like, well, I've been looking for a job for over a year, and it's kind of like if I go to junior camp, I might miss something. If I don't go to junior camp, I might not miss anything. So I was like, okay, God, I just applied for these jobs. I'll give this to you. Can you please take care of that? And I'll go serve, and I'll go be in junior camp. And it's funny sometimes when you go and you think you're serving, God is actually doing it for you. He has a message for you. And when we were driving to junior camp, there was this girl, she was sharing an article she had read about this man who was homosexual, and then he became a Christian. He said that he realized, like, after some time that he's like, I probably shouldn't be living this way, and he became convicted, and he's like, I shouldn't be living this way, and he was trying to stop really hard, and he couldn't, and like, he was doing everything right, like, from the outside, but from the inside, he had the same desires, and he said, God, please change me because I can't stop. I can't stop this. I can't stop wanting this. And he said, I just want to be normal. I just want to be like everybody else. Just please make me normal. I just want to be like everybody else. And he heard from God, and God said, I don't want you to be normal. I want you to be like me. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, because I remember praying, I was like, God, I'm just so tired of being that one person that doesn't have a job. I just want to be normal like everybody else. I just want to have a job. Just give me any job. Just let me be normal. And when I heard that, God has said to me, I want you to be like me. I'm like, okay, so maybe I need to shift my thinking. Maybe God doesn't want me to have a job in this career. And then another thing, we were in worship, and there was a song that said, you won't relent until you have it all. My heart is yours. And this song really touched my heart because I felt like God was chasing me down. It wasn't just a job for me. There was pretty much everything in my life that I had wanted, that I had hoped for, kind of fell apart. And it was a really dark time in my life with my dad getting sick, and then my dad dying, and then I had a friend who I couldn't forgive. There was just like a lot of stuff piled up on top of each other, and I felt like God was kind of chasing after me, and I had nothing left, and I almost felt kind of like Job a little bit. Like, I don't want to compare myself to him too much, but I felt like I had lost everything, and I felt like there was nothing around. And plus, I didn't have a job, and then I was I felt like God was chasing me, like, seriously. And so for that song, when I heard that song, I was like, I feel like God really wants me to give this up. And I think the month before in state youth, there was a song that said, it says, which basically translates as, I'm going to give you all of my crowns and all of my achievements. And I remember singing that song, and I was like, I can't even sing this song, like, truly, because I wouldn't be able to give up those, those diplomas, those 4.0s. Like, I feel like I couldn't give that up. Like, I was like holding it so tightly because I feel like, I earned this. This is me. This is who I am. And so, but when I heard that song at camp, that you won't relent until you have it all, I was like, okay, God, I give it up. This stuff doesn't mean anything. This stuff doesn't mean anything to me. And so the last thing, that we had a speaker, and he showed a video from Voice of the Martyrs, and it was a guy who'd been in jail. He was a pastor for 14 years, and he was in a prison that was all gray. Everything was gray. There was no color. And he said, after 14 years, you forget what fruit is. You forget what any kind of color is. And he said, I was so at such a low point in my life that I just couldn't even remember, like, why, the purpose of anything. And he said, when you're at such a low point, God will come to you. And he said he was sitting in jail, and Jesus came to him, and he said, what is your name? And when God asks you a question, he says, when God asks you a question like that, like he asked Adam, Adam, where are you? It's not because God was like, oh, where did Adam go? I can't find Adam. He was saying that because he was saying, Adam, think, why are you here? Why are you hiding behind a bush? And so when he said, what is your name? He started thinking, what is God really asking me? And so he said, I can't say I'm a pastor because I don't know where my flock is. I don't know where those people are. He said, I can't say I'm a father because I don't know where my kids are. I can't say I'm a husband. So he went through all of his things that he was, all his achievements, and he said he couldn't say anything. And he's like, I can't even say my name, because God would say, there was another person, famous person like that, and he would say, God would say, are you like this person? And he was like, I couldn't say I was like this person either. And so then he said, Jesus, I don't have a name. Can I borrow yours? Can I borrow yours? And so when I heard this, it kind of touched me too, because everything that all those diplomas, all those 4.0s, they didn't mean anything. I couldn't get a job. It didn't mean anything to me anymore. I was just like, God, I give this to you. I don't have this name anymore. This value that I placed on myself, I can't give this. I don't want this value on me anymore. And then I was like, I can't say that my name is Maria, because in the Bible, in the Russian Bible, Maria is Mary. It's the same name, and so it's like the mother of Jesus. I'm like, I can't say Maria because I'm not like that woman. And so I said, Jesus, I don't have a name. Can I borrow yours? And so those three things kind of really touched me. And so when we had a break, I went and I prayed at camp, and I just said, God, all this time, I've been kind of upset and kind of mad, and you don't really ever say that out loud, that you're like mad at God. You never say that, because it's almost kind of embarrassing to say that, or you wonder if God hates you, or if you wonder, you don't ever really say that. You don't ever say it to your friends. You just kind of think it deep in your heart, like, why is my life going so bad when everybody else is going well? You don't ever say that out loud, but in your subconscious, you think that. And so I kind of came to my knees and I said, God, whatever happens, I won't be mad at you. Whatever happens, I'm okay. I'll move on with my life, and I'll just go over it. It'll be okay. If I have to close that chapter in my life, I have to work minimum wage somewhere. If I never work in my career, that's fine with me. All those values, all that I placed on it, God, I give to you. And so after I prayed that prayer, I felt really free. And I went home, and the next couple of days I got calls. I got 2 job offers, and I was able to take both job offers, and I worked part-time. And it was really interesting, because I worked in a medical field, and when you take a year off in a medical field, that's a bad idea. You should always kind of study and study and study. And so it was interesting, though, because God gave me jobs where they trained me on the job exactly how they wanted, so it was very perfect for my needs and for everything that I needed at that time. And so when I prayed that prayer, it was kind of like, God, I value you and your opinion more than I value, what I had, those things. It's like saying, I value you more than I value education. I love you more. And another thing that happened after this, I got the jobs. A couple months went by, and I was invited to Prayer Mountain with a friend of mine, and I went down there, and I was just driving on the way, and I realized that, how I had placed education really high up on my value system. I had started to place my future, like who I'm going to marry, what's going to happen, all that. I started placing that as my value system. And what happened was that I was like, God, I don't want that to happen again. I don't want to put that as so high on my priorities that I'm going to do everything I can to get there without you, without putting that higher than you. And so I was praying. We were in a circle, and one at a time, we'd come into the circle, and then people would pray for us. And I was praying, I was saying, God, please help me to let go of my future, to let go of, whoever I'm going to marry, that fear, that anxiety, that wanting it to be, all the things that I want, God, please help me to give them to you, because this is something really, really important to me. And this girl came up to me and she said, I think you're praying about your husband. And I was praying silently, and so it was kind of embarrassing, because there was a lot of people, there was guys and girls, and I was like, well, I'm praying for my future, and so I was like, and so she's like, you have to let it go. And I was like, I know, I've experienced that letting go before, but I don't know what to say. Like, what do I say? And so she gave me the example of the story of the woman in the Bible who had that jar of ointment, and she broke it at the feet of Jesus. And that jar of ointment was like a year's worth of salary. So it was like a woman owned it, so it was like the most valuable thing she had. And so for me, that future was the most valuable thing I had. And so she said, you need to break that at the feet of Jesus. And so she led me through this prayer. And so I prayed with her. And so then I felt like, I finally felt like, just like that other prayer, how I let it go, I felt that same thing with my future. And then another lady came up to me, and she had a word for me that she said that the things that you think, or the things that you imagined, or the things you wanted, it'll be so much more. Your future will be so much more than you ever dreamed. And I would have to say that it turned out exactly how that word came, that I never imagined who I would marry. It turned out so well. And I served on the staff in Bible college, and then we would go to churches and invite youth to come, and they invited me to say a word, like a testimony, and I came. It was like at 8:30 in the morning, church was at 10, so I was like driving to church, writing my testimony, trying to translate into Russian as I'm going, and I'm like practicing Russian. I'm tripping over my words. I'm like, it sounds like I don't even know how to speak Russian. It was like, so I was like so nervous, so like worried, and my mom was praying for me. I come to church, and I start saying my testimony, and I was like, wow, I sound like I know how to speak Russian really, really well. Like, it was amazing. And it was kind of funny, because in the audience, my husband, my future husband, was sitting there, and so it was kind of interesting how if I hadn't said the testimony, my future husband wouldn't have seen me at that time. And he said that testimony is what made me decide, like, oh, I should contact this girl, because he had seen me before a few times at church in like different places, and he was like, oh, that's a nice girl. Like, I should talk to her. But then he always kind of got away from it. And then so a few times it happened, and then that one time he's like, oh man, I really need to talk to that girl. And so he called the director of Bible college. He got my number. And so that's kind of how I met my husband. And so it was a really big blessing. And it all started with that part where I said, God, I'm giving you the most valuable thing I have, because I love you more. And so with your dreams, whenever you have those dreams and you hold on so tight, that's a bad thing. God wants you to let go, to say, I love you more, God. And it's kind of like God asking Abraham to sacrifice his son, which was the most important thing to him. And when Abraham actually got there, God said, I don't want you to sacrifice your son. I just wanted to see if you would do it, if you would be willing to do it. And when he hears that we're ready to let go, he knows we're ready for a bigger blessing. He knows that we're ready to receive that bigger blessing, that we won't mess it up. And I always love listening to testimonies. They're always so encouraging, but the process that this all came about was extremely painful. And I know that sometimes when you have something happen in your life, and you're like sitting this close, and all you can see are like splotches, and you're like, what is wrong with my life? Why am I the only one that has all these problems going on? Why is it me that's having all these issues? You feel pretty lonely, and you feel like you can't talk to anybody. But years go by, and if you put God as the value, if you say, God, I love you more, then you'll step back, and years go by, and you'll look back, and you'll be like, wow, those splotches that I saw were actually a beautiful painting that I couldn't see at the time, because I was this close, because I was so stressed out, because I was so worried. But during that time, God is forming you. God is making you stronger, so that one day you'll be able to help other people. You'll be able to have compassion. So I thank God, and I pray that we all say, God, I love you more.